So we have three very special yogis with us today. This is our second conversation. The first one was about financial insecurity that many are feeling. And this one is about the benefit of intense times of purification, emotional eruptions, and relationships. And this is, I think many BKs have noticed in this lockdown period that we're just now starting to come out of, that there have been emotional eruptions. Things have erupted past sanskars that maybe were able to lie dormant, or we could be distracted and not pay so much attention to them, are in front of us on a daily basis. So this is partly the background to this. As well, I think that, so that's the lockdown aspect. But as well, I'm thinking of today's blessing, even where Baba says, you know, don't be afraid of your tamoguni sanskars, and how much, you know, intense emotions we can be afraid of them. And I know when I first came as a yogi, I looked around and I saw all these serene people, and I thought, are they having any feelings at all? I don't think I'm going to succeed here, because I had so much emotional intensity that I brought with me. So it's a big topic for now and for always in our purification process. So I'll introduce to you the three yogis. And we'd like to hear from each of them first. Then at the half an hour mark, we will together watch the United Yoga Bhati, because it happens at exactly this time. And then we will come back to continue our conversation. So we have with us Sister Gopi, who many of you know from Oxford, has been in London for some time, originally from Africa, and now sitting above the Tower of Peace in Madhubad for this period of quarantine. So beautiful to have you, Gopi. Thank you for joining us today. We have in Australia, Pamela, who is 40-year yogi, professional actress and trainer, and also skilled and knowledgeable in the field of counseling. So her own journey of looking at emotions and working with them. So thank you, Pamela. And it's a rare and beautiful treat. And you know, you're just a splash of beautiful color on the screen. It's beautiful for the eyes. And then we have Enrique in Spain, and Enrique, our senior wise brother, who seems to be omnipresent on these conversations around the world, you know, an easy yogi, and one who brings so much wisdom, natural daily wisdom. So part of the coordinating team in Spain, and a world server. So welcome, Enrique, and thank you for saying yes to this as well, our Haji brother. So I think it's just, if we could begin, I think we'll maybe go in that order. Gopi, if you'll start us off, and then maybe Pamela, and then Enrique. Can you just tell us a little bit about the experience you have had with emotions and sort of emotional intensity, and how that fits in our purification process? So the wisdom kind of based on your own experience with emotions. So Sister Gopi, if you'd start us off, that'd be great. We'll hear from each of you before the United Yoga Bhati, so 5 or 6 minutes each, and then we'll have our time in silence together and come back to take up more. Thank you, Gopi.
Thanks, Judy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very good.
Yeah. Okay. I think for me, I'm just remembering the first time I actually felt what I would call emotion many, many years ago, when I took a lot of sorrow from somebody. And it was an unexpected feeling of a lot of pain at that time that went right through me. And I remember thinking, this is emotion. Now, you know, it's one thing to feel joy and happiness and peace. And I suppose as a naive, you know, there's a sense of naivety in the early days of Brahmin life too. But I think things change when you actually start to take sorrow. And, you know, when I'm fast forwarding it back to to this point in time, and I'm just thinking and observing the journey of what's happened to me since Dadi has passed away, and having the good fortune of being in Madhuban, that I'm starting to see how so much of my personal emotion is linked to something incomplete or unresolved, and also is probably rooted in some form of grief. And I've really been thinking about this in the last couple of days, because I think Daddy passed away very quickly, a little bit too quickly for my liking, you know. It's really according to her nature she passed away. She's always just upped and left when her time has come. She doesn't wait for anybody. And when it was her time to go, she didn't wait for anybody, she just left. And within 10 hours, I think, everything had been done and dusted. You know, from her leaving the body to her funeral, her cremation. And it was a little bit like a magician that just comes along and throws some dust in your eyes and goes, I'm here 1 second, and then I'm gone the next. So I think for me, and then when I arrived back here in Pandit Bhavan after some time downstairs, I just started to feel a lot of grief in the body. And because as I was looking at it a little bit more, I started to feel, gosh, this isn't just linked with Daddy, but it's linked to a lot of different moments in my life where I've perhaps run over them, and or maybe I've moved on, but my body hasn't moved on with me in that moment. And one of the things that I started to see inside that was associated with a form of grief is bargaining, is just going back to that moment in time and just starting to think, what if I'd done that differently? And that actually isn't very helpful at this point, but you can just see the dynamics that it plays out. And it starts to make me think how incredible a Brahmin life is, because we have to let go of so much in so many different ways, in gross ways, in subtle ways. And, you know, sometimes our divine intelligence works for us, but it takes time, I think, for the body to catch up with all the different changes that a Brahmin goes through. And I think for me at this time, it's more about just allowing everything to settle. And, you know, allowing whatever has to come, has to come. And I'm finding the experience of going into, I would say, deep bliss with Baba. It's not just silence, but it's a silence that is filled with a lot of softness. And it's a silence that just seems to be neutralizing all memories of every kind. And in that whole process, I feel that, you know, Baba's just blotting out the effect, especially from the body, of having to leapfrog through so many things, having to move through so many intense periods, karmic accounts. And I feel that a big part of emotional quietening, when, you know, everything just starts to settle, is to do a lot with cleaning the chip, the kind of memory. Because, you know, I feel that, you know, even as Brahmins, we have a collective memory. We are joined together at the hip, so to speak. But there's also, you know, we have a shared memory. And somehow me clearing my chip and becoming lighter, I'm contributing to an emotional well-being in the family. That was my feeling. It was just letting myself just sit with Baba and letting Baba's drishti just bring the soul back to very, very deep place of neutrality and bliss. And I'm finding that as that happens, the body is starting to clean out residues of the impact of what it's taken as it's moved through so many, many situations of different types in the last years. So I guess that's in a nutshell, really, what I want to share. And then let's see what progresses in the conversation.
Thank you, Gopi. That's beautiful. So interesting. We'll come back to that. So I hear you saying the effect is in the body and something stored there as well as in the chit, and that just the act of being quiet and sitting with bliss and Baba is settling, and it's this quieting is cleaning the chit and somehow the effect in the body. So we'll come back to that, can we? Because that's a new angle. This effect in the body is kind of lovely. So thank you. And yeah, we'll give you a chance to clarify any of that later if we can, but as a starting, that's great. Thank you so much, Gopi. Pamela, how about you? Speak to us a bit about the wisdom that you have, you know, over all these years gathered in relation to emotions and our purification process.
So I think I'd have to say that I, a bit like you, I came into my spiritual life, I would say a bundle of trauma. I mean, I love the work of Brene Brown, who discusses the idea around being vulnerable, that in a way to heal and to move through our story, we have to awaken to that vulnerability. And it is really difficult, because I think you touched on it too, that as a Brahmin, a new Brahmin, you come in and you see all these people. And I remember hearing one little slogan, which was, feeling is failure. And I really, I was a bit traumatized by that as well, because all I had going on inside of me was trauma. And I remember as a 19-year-old going to Madhavan and sitting in the Murli and hearing all these amazing points and just bursting into tears and rushing into Baba's room and just sitting there in front of Baba, just kind of going, wow, what am I going to do with this? So for me, it's been a very long journey of really owning and naming and claiming that story and really gently putting those pieces back together again. So and later on, I will explain a personal story to give more highlight as to how I started to understand my own emotional operating system and how I started to kind of, if you like, heal that. So I really loved some of the stuff that Gopi was saying, in the sense that we use that time with Baba to kind of reparent ourselves and to refigure some of that trauma. But for me, it has been a long journey of really accepting the fact that I had this sort of traumatic life and that I had to really reclaim myself in that. So when we talk about emotional explosions, it's also implosions where we get triggered and we implode on ourselves, and then we start to experience depression and blame and anger and all sorts of exotic and mayhemish type things. So I'd also like to take that up a little bit later on as to how we can start to process some of that in a really healthy way. And as we know, we can't really ask Baba to do that work. Baba is that beautiful vortex in which we can swim and have that experience of remembering our original self, but we have to do the work to identify what our story is saying to us particularly and start to work on that. So we can go into that a little bit later on, but that's been my journey. That I've had a lot of work to do, and I'm still doing that work, and I find it extremely I really love it when I start to feel myself melting and those knots undoing and that trauma starting to fade away. And I think this idea of past is past really only happens when you do experience and understand what it is, your story is what it is you have to do with your story. So that's in a nutshell for me. I'll explain more later. Over to Enrique.
Yeah, well, let's make sure we come back to that, Pamela. You said a lot of wonderful things there. This is an interesting idea, an emotional implosion. I never thought of that before, and that would be where depression and blame and all that's coming from. So I take that to mean, and we will come back, that not properly dealt with that can also happen, right? So somehow emotion connected to trauma, which also relates to what Gopi said about taking sorrow. So that's interesting how much emotion is connected, either previously or even now, taking sorrow, which would be trauma. And then I really like to come back after we hear from Enrique, and let's see if we have time before the United Yoga Bhatti, but what actually is the work we need to do? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Jyoti Ben. She's saying, can you reduce the speed for translation?
Okay, yes.
Om Shanti. Yes, that is. I have discovered that excitement is different than happiness in the emotional department. So as I get excited, I speed up. Okay, let me just take a moment to deal with this. Volume for translation is very low, and we're not sure if Spanish is getting translated. So Marcelo, can I just leave that with you to take care of those things by chat? And then
Alguien está escuchando en el canal de español y me puede decir que están escuchando. Gracias. Gracias, Lidia.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we can come back to this whole topic because I think it's
Así que podremos volver a
Brahmins. What is our work to do in the emotional cleansing department, and what is Baba's? So we'll come back to that, Pamela, and I think you'll offer wisdom there for us. Thank you. Enrique, over to you. Tell us about your lived experience with emotions on the purification process.
I'm very grateful for these 3 months. I think I've done more deep work than a few years back. I was distracted with many things, work and service, and I'm also busy now, yes, but I have put a lot more attention, so has been very nice. And I feel that many things has been cleansed inside and also clarified, no, also for me. But let me tell you how I started in Gyan, so that you can see how are my emotions at the beginning. And I came with 27. I was 27 after 6 years of running around the world and being married with a child and so many things. And I haven't cried even one tear in my life till 27, not even one drop. And many things happened in my life. Even I tried in the mirror. I remember one day looking at me in the mirror, trying to, ooh, and no one tear, very dry. And I took the course, and after the course, the sisters were there giving me drishti, and there were no tears, that were balls of, boom, like, like an ocean. And I was telling them, don't worry, I'm fine, but I cannot stop this, and I don't want to stop this, because it was like sadness, but at the same time, happiness of taking out something inside myself. No? So this took 1 year. 1 year of feeling of sadness inside myself, emotions of sadness, a lot of sadness, and tears. And at the same time, mixed with love, experience of love. So it was really up and down. No? So now everything has changed after 30 years. And I feel much more balanced. But these 3 months, I was able sometimes to experience some kind of sadness, but I felt it was not my sadness, because I don't feel sad usually. But it was like feeling, as Baba said, can you feel the sorrow of the souls? So we have up in the center, we have a nice terrace upstairs. So we can sit there, take a little bit of the sun, and it's very nice. You can see the sky. So sometimes I meditate there. I sit, I lay down. And the first days I was feeling sadness, and I said, I'm not sad. What's this? So it was like picking up the energy of the world, no? Also, so I feel that we are also like antennas. You say antennas, and we can pick up the energy what is happening outside, no? But then I went deep and I observed myself, and I realized that I need more to work on tolerance, on accommodation. And so I focused my attention and my concentration in my yoga, saying to Baba, Baba, you have said to me, I guarantee you, if you remember me, I will clean all your things inside and I will give you powers. No? So my work has been very of concentration, focus, and all the time 2-3 things with Baba, and allowing him to give me this light, this power, and be very open. And also with purity. I thought I need to clean something in my chit, no, in my subconscious mind. I remember when I started, I was smoking, and I stopped smoking after the course. But during 1 year, I still was smoking in dreams. In dreams, I was smoking. But after 1 year, I remember one day in one dream, I say, no, I don't smoke. So I stopped smoking even in dreams. No? So sometimes dreams give me, to me, a lot of information. No? So I thought, let me clean deeper the chit or the unconscious mind, not the subconscious mind. So I was meditating, and I felt that I had like a, I don't know in English, is worm? Worm is this little a worm? It's not a virus, it's like a worm in my unconscious mind. No? So I thought this was the impurity very deep rooted in my inner, inside. So I was like an operation doing with Baba, and open my mind and say, Baba, please take this worm, go inside and take it and clean it. So it was very nice experience, but still, because there is a big generation. So you took some, but there are other small ones, they appear. So for me, it's like cleaning the subconscious mind, no? Cleaning very deep and be very honest and open to Baba so that he can do the work. But your work is to be honest, to be open, not to be afraid, not to repress, but just to allow this to happen. And to be honest, this is what it is. This is what it is inside me, and I cannot avoid it. I cannot neglect it because it's there. So I try to be very honest, and this is my way of dealing with these things. And in the other side, I've experienced very nice feelings these days. So there were not big emotions, but more nice feelings of, as Gopi said, deep silence and very soft energy and some kind of serene happiness. So it was very nice, no? So this process of cleansing the chit and the subconscious mind and all this stuff brought to me nice feelings. So it was a mixture. And the thing that I would say is that I've put a lot of attention in myself about emotions and feelings and all these things. So I can feel in my body when some of these energies, I would say, start to emerge. I can feel in my stomach, or I can feel in my chest. So they give me signals so that I can put attention, more attention, and be very aware of not allowing them to go out and to transform them before. So well, it's a little bit my experience.
That's wonderful, Enrique. Thank you. Was there a time that you had emotional eruptions? I mean, it sounds like you went from not having anything to discovering. Was there a period in there when you found yourself with emotions that erupted?
Well, yes, in a sense, irritation and anger was there sometimes. Yes.
Okay. And this is the focus now on tolerance and
Exactly.
accommodation. And so you've carried that with you throughout the journey, and then they show up in smaller forms now, but more obvious to you.
Exactly.
And also you have a greater awareness of the body signals
Mm-hmm.
when something's about to come up. So they're not entirely gone yet.
No.
And
Yet.
this is how many years?
Only 35? No, 33.
No, but that's reassuring in a way. I mean, our purpose for these conversations is to reassure and assist, you
Yes.
know, and so it doesn't seem like it's a magic overnight thing.
No.
From any of you old yogis, golden experienced Raj yogis are saying is that it is a journey over time. All right, I'm told we have 1 minute to Bhatti. I'm wondering if anyone has 1 minute to say before we go into Bhatti.
You know, I was just feeling as Enrique was speaking, I was thinking, you know, Baba has something to do with this too. I mean, he's got a job to get done. and he kind of picks us out in whatever packaging we're in, and he will do what he has to do, no matter what your state or your condition is. And then you're left to pick up all the pieces afterwards, if you know what I mean. And so, you know, I kind of have to look at this whole emotional thing in the context of purification, because this very, very pure energy has entered our lives and is using us. And traffic control has just started on that note. So maybe
right. We will tune in to the United Yoga Bhati as well. That's great, Gopes. Can you finish your thought when we come back after Bhati? All right. Thank you. 5 minutes left, and we have heard a number of questions from you over the break, so we will include those in our next question. So Gopi will first, if you can continue speaking a bit about Baba's involvement, especially in cleaning this chit.
I think the thread that I was on earlier was that, especially for Brahmins, I think in Baba's language, Baba doesn't use the word emotion, but I know that Baba's Murlis refer to the word storm. So be it, you know, a storm of feelings, an emotion, it's normal and it's part of that purification process. And my feeling is that, you know, as I've observed in myself, getting to the bottom of various different storms, it's so deeply connected with a sense of loss at some level that's probably not conscious, and it might not even be of this birth. And I had this experience just recently sitting in Baba's hut, and there was very clearly something that I felt, it's time to say goodbye to this thing. And as I'm saying to Baba, Baba, take this, there's a voice inside me that says, no, I don't really want to let it go. And I realized that a big part of me staying stuck in an emotional rut, if you like, has to do with something I'm holding on to that I actually don't want to let go of in that moment. But it was so beautiful sitting there with Baba and actually saying to him, I don't really want to let this go, because in some funny way, this still brings me pleasure. And it was like Baba was just continuing to give drishti and saying, it's fine. And in that moment, it was like I could see the point in the cycle when this first began, using this sanskara first began. And we didn't have to do anything between us. There was no rationalizing. There was no making sense of it. I was just honest with what was as it was, and he was just sitting with me as he was. And towards the end of that meditation and that just being with Baba, there was just this really deep feeling right at the very end. It's you. I found you again. And I think that's very important for Brahmin souls to feel. You know, when Baba says one Baba, none other, I think whatever big loss, small losses we may have experienced on the journey, I think the deep feeling of, yeah, it's you, I found you again, it suddenly just brings you back home again and allows a sense of acceptance of what was in the cycle, the naughtiness, the mischievousness, the whatever it is that happened in the whole cycle. So, you know, Baba's just incredible, because he just sits there and he goes, yeah, I know. I know. And I just sit still and be quiet. And yeah.
That's beautiful. So Baba just sits there. And you're seeing it and realizing inside yourself that you were the one hanging on somehow gave you a moment of realization, insight, but also just acceptance that it was. So all of the failure or judgment of self or whatever, it was just a quiet moment of acceptance. seems to have been a big part of the settling. Lovely. Pamela, would you like to share a little bit? You spoke earlier about, and this will maybe tag on to what Gopi's saying, but the method. So how you've worked with this, how you've approached the settling of some of these emotions.
Well, you know, I'm not a big expert in this field, but I've definitely had to try and use a lot of different methods for myself, especially when and I guess I want to more or less talk about this for people who may be struggling, you know, because I don't live in a centre also. Some of us live in families, we live in jobs where sometimes we're just running really hard, and the resilience can be low when these eruptions or explosions can take place. And I just want to sort of talk a little bit about, you know, our character and how our character forms. We all know this word denial, and you know, sometimes when we're in working relationships with people, someone might say to us, look, you're in denial, you are a bully and you're bullying me and I'm not going to take it anymore. Or it could be, you look really down, what's going on? Nothing, everything's fine, I just, you know, I'm tired or whatever. So there's a whole lot of language we have to hide all these kinds of different emotions and feelings that we have. And because we're Brahmins, spiritual people, we really want to fake it until we make it. We want to try and put our best foot forward, but sometimes internally, and I do, because I do some counselling with old Brahmins and new Brahmins, I do get to hear the internal stories that people have. And, you know, sometimes people can go through several months of being sort of stuck in a place of sadness or depression or fear or anxiety, even though they have all the gyan that you could ever have. And these are people who've been in gyan 30, 40 years or whatever, or people who are new. So it is a real thing. Mental health is a real experience, just like our body health is real. And there are certain things you can do to get yourself through those rough patches, you can find that power to, again, do what Gopi's saying, is where you can actually connect into Baba and really experience that love of give and take from Baba. But sometimes people find themselves sitting in front of a trance light, sleeping, or deeply sort of involved in sort of thinking traps and negative thinking. So I think the first step is to, when a circumstance happens to you where you find yourself erupting, either imploding or exploding, is you really should start to do exploration. And that's where we become an adventurer, a spiritual adventurer. And we start to identify what is below the circumstance, what need is there that I'm not fulfilling. And that could be for many, many reasons. So I'm going to give a small example of a personal experience so it makes sense to people. I went back to school when I was 30-something to learn counselling about 10 years ago. And actually, it was not that far. But anyway, I went back to school. But in my childhood, I was dyslexic. So I left school at 14. I really never passed any exams. So here I was putting myself in university. And one of the very scary lecturers said, look, you're going to fail this essay. You need to go and do it again. And I found in that moment there was an explosion of blame and hate, and I really wanted to just run this teacher down and say, look, that's, you know, you're not a very good teacher, that's why I'm not learning. I was in denial. So this whole kind of eruption happened around something from my childhood that I'd actually never actually come to terms with, the fact that, you know, young Pamela really suffered as a child because she had experienced no success in school, and here she was, very intelligent woman, going back to school, and she was faced with having to really face that past. So I went home, I cried a lot, I felt really ashamed, and I thought, I have Baba's knowledge. I looked at Baba and he just looked back at me, and I still had that big lump that I had to deal with. So I thought, I am not going to fail in this situation. I'm going to actually really embrace it. So I rang a friend, Niall, I think he's listening there today. I said, Niall, I need help. I'm really suffering. And he came over. I allowed my little vulnerable child, a dyslexic child, to sit there with the adult child. I had Niall sitting there, and I really opened up and became vulnerable about that story. And, you know, he really just created a sacred space for me to sit with, and I could feel Bubba also there. And that whole circumstance that I created for myself really allowed me to put myself back together again, so my self-respect could face that scene. And I finished that essay, and I passed. And that little dyslexic person that lived strongly in my past started to come in my present. And as I started to accept her and really take her forward with me, she became very creative. And, you know, I ended up getting a lot of honors in my course because I started using creativity and all the things that I'd developed as that dyslexic person. So facing that moment in a creative way, accepting that I needed to take help, and really honoring the fact that I was retrieving a part of myself that was lost, and actually embedding it in this new part of who I was, I experienced such self-efficacy, and I started to understand what it is to build a self-respect that is really based on honesty and acceptance. And as I started to do that, I realized that my self-respect was like an immune system for the challenges that were ahead. And that really set me on the way to starting to use and really explore what history I'm carrying. What is this Pamela? Who is she? Where is she from? What broken bits need to be brought forward? And how can I use them, you know, in the angel self? How can that become a part of my personality, where I may share and hold sacred spaces for other people to experience themselves? So there are so many different ways. I mean, this is just a small glimpse, but there are so many different tools you can use when those implosions or explosions occur that actually become magical, and really they become more tools for you to share with other people. Because, you know, angels are not empty-headed people without experience. They are people who have, you know, eaten the dust and who have come back with the diamonds from that dust. So, you know, I say to anybody out there who is suffering or who has experiences of really feeling sort of the trauma of the past and not knowing what to do, there are so many beautiful techniques which you can learn to bring yourself forward and allow that stuff to shine. I don't know whether that makes any sense, but...
Oh, it absolutely makes good sense, Pamela. That's beautiful work that you've done, and it sounds very consistent with what Gopi's describing. It's just more overt and active. Well, not even more active, both very active. Gopi, would you comment on what you heard from Pamela?
Oh, I really appreciate what Pamela is saying, because I feel that surrendering to what comes up is crucial. You know, I watched Daddy one time, Daddy Janki, and it was a moment when she was quite vulnerable. She wasn't very well. I was in India. It was off season. And she really wanted Daddy Gulzar to stay. And Daddy Gulzar had come across and was telling her she was going to Bombay. And it was a time when I know that he was feeling very vulnerable is probably the right word because of this circumstances given. And the moment she heard that Daddy Gulzar was leaving for Bombay, something just shifted in her. I don't know if something broke, but something came up and I could see it on her face. And then I just watched her surrender to it. And it was almost like she then for 3 days stopped speaking. She just let herself just go into this feeling. And it was like, you know, there was a bit of sadness, but in that sadness, there was a detachment. It was like she was just letting this thing overtake her, and she was being natural with it. And she stopped speaking for 3 days. And, you know, it was like you couldn't reach her. You just couldn't reach her in those 3 days. And we were a little concerned. I knew she could understand everything we were saying, because in between a word or two, it's like, why are you trying to make me speak? And then she just go into it. And I think there's something that's very important to hold that, you know, to hold that and to surrender into it, to let yourself feel the sadness. And then what starts to happen afterwards is you just actually start to appreciate the tremendous capacity of love that you have. Because I think that in every bit of loss, the reason why we feel lost so deeply is because we've loved so deeply. And I feel that's so important to touch base with, that I have loved so much and so deeply, and that's why I felt this loss. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So I really just appreciated what Pamela shared. Thank you.
Enrique, comments from you on this. It sounds, and Pamela's got many tools, because I think she's made it an active exploration. And we all would have our own tools, but it sounds very much like a healing process is what our purification is about. Can you share a tool or a method that you find useful?
Well, I agree completely with Pamela. Honesty and acceptance is very important. I would add, because I've done some work similar to that, no? To observe myself, to go deep inside myself, to see my child who was hurt for something, and take care again. And I remember I created an image of seeing myself and my image of when I was a boy, little boy, and also Brahma Baba, and saying to the little boy, don't worry, don't be afraid, I'm with you, I love you, but not only me, but Brahma Baba also loves you so much. So I was almost crying, because it was so nice, this feeling. So I feel this is very nice to connect with your child and to give love, because we haven't received many times love when we were children, no? So, but I can add another thing is journaling. I've processed many emotions and many storms, I would say. I like this idea of Gopi, that Baba says storms, no? Connected with his emotions. By journaling. I have so many pages and so many books written, and I talk to myself. Sometimes I talk to Baba, but many times I talk to myself, and I talk as a friend. I've developed the practice of not judging myself, not blaming myself. This I have achieved, and I have been very happy. So happen what happened, there is a voice now, which is a friend, and is myself, and I talk to myself, and I write, hello, Enrique, how are you? Wow, I'm very bad today. What happened? So it's so nice, no? And after 1 page, 2 pages, it's like Gopi said, if you surrender to that in this way also, because you write it without denying it, just accepting it and writing about it, it's like it dissolves. And one thing I've learned also is not to repress these storms, not to blame myself or to judge myself. Of course, not to blame others. This is very clear for many years already. Not to blame others, not circumstances also. So I have to deal many times with these storms, internal storms. And my way of doing it is writing. Writing, and also sometimes going for a walk and talking to myself and just walking and let these feelings emerge. I remember once, it was a difficult situation in the center, souls were very tough. I was living in a very small place, and I used to live in big centers. So I felt really alone. First time in my life. Even before, I didn't felt alone, no? So loneliness, not alone, loneliness, no? So I was feeling really like lost. It was not a storm of anger or lust. It was a storm of maybe depression, I don't know, but it's not my nature, no? So I was walking, I remember, in the streets of Madrid and saying, where am I? I don't belong to this world. I'm disconnected from the other world. Baba is there, but it's like the translate, you have to say. It's like an image. But one thing was true, it's faith. I had the faith that the sun was there, even though I didn't see the sun. So I have clear in my mind, these are black clouds, storms, and I have to continue to walk, just continue to walk. Maybe not very fast. I don't know if there was slow, but continue to walk, just accept, walk. And always I remember the words of Daddy Yankee to me, but also to many other souls I've translated. She always put this finger like this and she said, don't stop, don't stop. So happen what happened, she always says, don't stop. So I think the storms are not a mistake. The storms are not a failure. The failure if you stop and you say, okay, I cannot do anything. I just live this life, and this is the failure then. But if you continue, I think it's part of the journey to have storms, and the art, I think, is how fast you are able to deal with the storms and to surf, no? And to go then faster, and then to arrive this place to creativity, and then the space of more, you have more space inside yourself because something has gone out. And then there is the contrary. Suddenly you feel more happy, more enthusiastic, with a lot of energy. Then you have a good meditation and you say, let's see, what's this? I was in a storm and now I feel better. So you have to learn about yourself and learn the process. And it takes time. But at the same time, at the end now, I feel it's very interesting, I would say. It's not comfortable, but if you change uncomfortability, no, into interesting, so it's not also uncomfortable. It's a kind of interesting process of observation, transformation, processing, and then space for yourself, creativity, lightness again, no? So something like that.
That's beautiful. I'll ask Pamela to respond to that. Any thoughts that come to you, Pam, from hearing that? Oh, you have to unmute, Pam. Wait.
I felt floaty. I felt taking the journey with Enrique. Because I've been, hammering away at my own defense mechanisms and vulnerabilities for such a long time, I also feel the joy and the lightness, and in a way it's the fruits of all the hard work I've done over the years. But again, I just want to say to those who are still, in the midst of that journey that, and as Gopi said so beautifully, leaning into the sort of suffering and to find and exploring with it and finding out, once you actually face it and name it, it actually becomes the paper tiger. And I remember Baba said that to me once, that Maya is the paper tiger. All you have to do is blow it. And he went like that and blew my face. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did try that method a lot of times. Yes, after all those hard efforts of not being afraid of yourself, really exploring and being the witness also, just, that's that idea of being loving and detached. It doesn't mean to be aloof and loving. It really does mean to witness and to really see what it is I'm experiencing. And often before we get to that courageous place where we want to sort of look inside ourselves and be able to identify what's going on, we've built a lot of different mechanisms around ourselves, that are kind of hard. And the beautiful thing is, once you start to be a bit vulnerable, to be a little bit more honest, and to create really spiritual friends, where there's a therapeutic relationship between you and your Brahman friends, where you can actually really speak honestly, and the other people listen without judgment. You listen to them without judgment, and you create a community, a therapeutic community where honesty and respect really grow. That's when you know that we can create heaven on earth, because until we have that kind of kindness and empathy with each other, we really won't be able to be a community. And I see it happening more and more, as I listen to, the older Brahmins who are becoming really comfortable with their shadow side and starting to do that deep work. You really do feel a lot of trust and a lot of openness with those people. So we need to become more like that for each other, so that we can become, that community that really is living and walking the talk. And there isn't those political games or that, sort of jealousy and struggle to get position and fame and name and all those things which actually are treacherous for our well-being. So I'm really loving to hear where everyone's at, and that feeling of freedom that people are starting to feel.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. All three of you are talking about surrender. All three of you are talking about just accept it. All three are talking about friends, whether it's, sitting and Baba just sits there with me the way Niall did with you, or whether it's, it's speaking in your own journal to yourself as a friend, but getting to the point where you're no longer blaming yourself or blaming others for the emotional intensity that you're experiencing. And that's the journey we're on, isn't it? But it sounds like a critical element. I think there's a Buddhist saying that says, I am the sky, everything else is weather, using our storm metaphor, you know, so that we call it detached observer. We practice all the time to pull back from the emotions we're having. And Baba uses it all in one word, storm. Storm came, storm left, I'm still here. What about any advice, because this came out as one of the chats actually, was if you're feeling guilt, or you're feeling failure, or you're feeling bad, even though you're doing all the right things in your Brahman life. Could one of you respond to that, please? Words of loving wisdom for that.
Could I just speak to that briefly? That you'll find there are themes, you know. So for me, I had several years of feeling rejected, and it was a theme that ran through, you know, my experience. And once I understood it was a theme, and that I am not rejected, I am a creator. So I turned it around. So I think, you know, for the person who asked that question, you'll find a theme in your sadnesses or your irritation or whatever it is. And then you just have to find the remedy for that, which is, you know, whatever the theme may be, you'll be able to find a remedy for it. Anybody else want to suggest anything?
You know, I suppose what works for me is actually switching off my intellect, because I'm a bit too clever for my own good. When I start to give language to feeling, it actually traps me. But when I feel discomfort and I'm able to then bring that to Baba, because Baba for me is a very alive presence, especially here at this point in Madhuban. I'm really appreciating being here because, you know, I know that stuff that I don't think I could shift at home in London, I'm able to shift because I have Baba's room here, and Baba's just feels so alive here. And I think for me, the guilt factor, in my experience, is when I've been a little bit too clever with myself in trying to package a mistake or trying to understand or blame myself. I'm just talking to myself too much. So I just have to kind of stop. And I just sit with Baba, with whatever, and I just said, now show me something. And sometimes you have to wait. You just have to take your hands off it and you have to wait. And next morning at Amrit Vela or an evening meditation, a memory pops up, something pops up, and it's ready to be released. So it's almost like a waiting game. You've got to really be very, very patient with yourself. You can't push your feelings to change. But what lets them change is when you just wait with them. And, you know, when it surfaces, it just means it's time for it to go. Mm-hmm. And when I say surrender, on numerous times, the one thing that I've learned watching Daddy over so many years is her surrendered intellect to whatever experience she was facing. It could be a bodily experience, it could be a quote unquote emotional experience, could be a relationship experience. She would just, her intellect would just switch off. She'd just surrender to what was happening. And I remember a time when she was really, really sick. She'd gotten, you know, what was it? Urine infection, chest infection. She couldn't speak. She was lying on her bed. And Gayatri Ben from New York had flown in. And after about a week, Daddy had enough energy to sit on her couch. And Gayatri asked her the question, Daddy, where do you get your energy from? To kind of recover. You keep coming back. It doesn't matter if your body slams you down or something happens and you get pushed down. And Daddy just closed her eyes, put her head back, and she said, Daddy knows a deep secret in the drama, that whatever has come has to go. And so Daddy just waits for it to go. And so when you asked that question, the first thing for me was just wait. Mm-hmm. You know, it would be a phrase, wait and see, Daddy would often use a lot, actually. Be it in relation to something we were going through, she'd just go. like this, or you'd feel like you've done something and you're, wait, what next? And she'd go, wait and see. So there's this whole energy of cultivating very deep patience with the self.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just not trying to be too clever with the self, to try and bring too many words to what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
but to just let it be as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, eventually the links and the connections will reveal themselves through memories, through an interaction. Dots will be joined, but it will be very natural. And that way I won't have expended too much energy of my intellect, because you know you're going down the wrong track when you get tired and your intellect starts to get tired. And that's when you can get stuck in an emotional rut for a period of time.
Thinking
And, you know,
about the emotions, thinking about them.
That's right. Yeah. And I do agree with what Pamela says. Sometimes you can't reach Baba by yourself. And sometimes it's important to find somebody that, and I remember Bap Dada saying this one time, you know, when somebody had asked, it was a personal meeting, and they'd said, but Baba, I have this problem with this person, who do I share it with? And Baba says, of course you can share it with me. But if you can find somebody that you have faith in, and that person needs to have the ability to merge, so that whatever it is that you're sharing, they can merge it through the power of their remembrance. And I think this is so much love. You know, this is love amongst each other. This is what spiritual friendship is. It's when my connection with Baba's not quite up to par, then I lean on your connection with Baba. And I can ask for that help, because you belong to me and I belong to you. And I think that that's the beauty of what is going to get us to, you know, completion. I feel like Baba's done his work. He's given us whatever he had to give. And we have to help each other do the finishing job, using the strength of our own presence with Baba, our yoga with Baba, to support each other.
Thank you, Gopi. Beautiful. Enrique, how about you? Comments on this one? It's lovely, Pamela, saying theme. It's like maybe the theme is rejection, or maybe the theme is I feel like a failure, or maybe the theme is I feel guilty. We have these patches, and they can be long patches. So Daddy says wait, and I'm waiting 12 years, still feeling guilty, or still feeling like a failure every time I fall asleep at Amrit Bela or whatever. These are themes, but they can be quite long-standing themes. And I hear, Enrique earlier said, faith, it's a storm, it will pass. And so 12 years later, I'm still, but the difference between waiting without, and attaching myself to that feeling, I'm a failure, I'm bad, I'm whatever, that's not helping me in my journey. Enrique, any comments you would offer on this?
Well, I agree with the importance of having some friends, spiritual friends. And for me, writing to Daddy Yankee was really a very deep help. She didn't reply long letters, just one sentence or two sentences, but it was enough, no? Just writing to Baba or writing to Daddy was enough to suddenly to feel relief, no? And to feel more light. But it's true. I think part of the journey is to how you say, to go with your dark side. I would say, no. To the journey is part, so that you get used to that and you deal with that, but you don't allow that to influence you in the bad way. This is the thing. So I've created in my mind like different characters. No, so there are different characters that creates these emotional storms. So I see them, they are there, and I say, oh, you still are here. Yes, okay, let's go, let's continue. But I don't allow them to be here. This is the thing. Oh, they are here, and I hear them, and sometimes they want to come a little bit closer. Hey, hello, Enrique. No. Before they were in me, now they are outside me, but I know that still are some link with them. So I have to patiently continue, and also to use, it's my nature, no? I like heroes, warriors, so these heroes of the films, and So this is something that I like. So it's my nature. So I use this for myself, and then I say I'm a spiritual warrior, no? Or I give myself these titles. So this gives me strength, inner strength. It's not that I fight, but it's like strength, no? So sometimes I remember when I was in Andalusia. In Andalusia, the founder of Andalusia is Hercules. Hercules, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw Hercules and I say, wow, it's what's happened to me. He made nine jobs, no, and he passed through one thing, then the other thing, then this big monster, then so many things, no. So I was thinking, oh, this is very connected with me. So sometimes when some storm came, I think, well, I'm like a hero of this, and I have to just be there, accept, tolerate, and still tolerating sometimes. And lot of patience, because I've realized that it's not worth to blame yourself, because this gives you not energy. So just accept, continue to move forward, don't stop, and see the destination, or see who you really are, and bring this energy to yourself. And of course, when you can and you are close to Baba, bring the energy of Baba and accept, go, move on, move forward, and the destination is closer and closer.
Thank you. Such loving compassion for the self, but also some playfulness and adventurousness and courage. Like Pam was speaking about the adventure earlier, you know, it's quite an epic hero's journey we're on, isn't it? And these emotions which have resided in us for so long are kind of like those 9 different tasks that Hercules had to face. You know, that's why those stories were made for us. This is so rich. We only have 10 minutes left. We could go on for an hour. I know we could, because we're only just getting started. But I want to ask one more question that came up consistently on the chat box, and this is the relationship part of today's theme. So it was emotional eruptions, which we've spent a lot of time on, and the other one was relationships. So I think we probably all know that when these emotional things happen in me and I look out at that Brahmin sister that I live with, and I think it's her, then we call that a karmic account, but actually that's all happening in me. But the question on the chat box is how to manage in the settling of, in the relationship aspect, because while I'm going through my things, my Brahmin brother or sister is going through their things, and it's all happening sometimes in quite close quarters, whether physical quarters or just we see each other every day for 35 years, you know? So comments on the managing the emotional intensity that's also within the relationships. And we'll start with you, Gopi, on this one.
You know, I was remembering Oxford. There's 38 of us in one house, and everybody knows, the brothers know what clothing the sisters wear, the sisters know what clothing the brother wear. Everybody knows what's happening to everybody because you're so in each other's faces. And I think there's 2 things that I felt over the years helped us to kind of regulate, because you're right when you say that, you know, Brahmins do become triggers or instruments for us to be able to settle stuff inside us, and it's not with them, but they're major triggers, is that collective yoga. That when we've consistently sat for yoga together, we've studied together, the disciplines that Baba has put out for us, that energy of actually just generating spirituality collectively helps very much in neutralizing or allowing us to pass through our stuff quickly. And then the second thing is that we would have regular meetings. You know, every Tuesday night was our family night, where no matter what happened, you know, classes, no courses, no nothing. And that was the night when we could do a number of things. Over time, everybody started to get comfortable about opening up. It wasn't so easy in the beginning because when you're going through something, you don't want to talk about it, and it's probably wise not to speak about it. But we just bake a cake and eat a cake together, and sometimes that was enough. But more than just just knowing that Tuesday night we're just going to be together, that was enough. It was enough to help start to maintain a sense of lightness. It's okay, whatever is as it is, we can laugh about it, we can forget about it, leave it in the room, be light and move on. So I think that when you're in a community together, of course, the strongest thing for me, the most powerful thing, is actually studying together and having yoga together. That Baba does so much through that collective. And if we separate ourselves from the gathering, which what happens when I think we get stuck in an emotional rut is that, you can want to go off by yourself and work it out. And actually you're just elongating your suffering. But to actually be part of the gathering, and, it will pass. I've known times when in Oxford, when, oh my gosh, you wake up and you go, oh, this is so horrible. This is such a horrible feeling. And then, you make yourself get to Murli, but as you're sitting in the Murli and the energy of the Murli, the energy of just being in the gathering, that just by the end of the Murli, that just takes it over and finishes it. Mm-hmm. So there's something very powerful now at this point in time, especially where the power of the gathering is very, very important and helpful in helping to finish things.
So just stay with it, you're saying. Even though you feel like your skin is being peeled off, as I remember Sister Denise once saying, you just stay with it, tolerate.
When you accept that this is what you've created. I remember this one time when I had reached a real point of like, I don't think I can take this anymore. And then I just sat down and I went, okay, you walked out of your kingdom. You abandoned your kingdom. You left it in chaos. Now you're coming back to reclaim your kingdom. You're going to get some pushback. Face it, accept it. Forgive your kingdom, forgive your people, forgive your subjects, say sorry, but tolerate this stuff. And, maybe this is like a pinprick of an experience compared to the Dharamraj experience. So just bring it on now so that you don't have to face Dharamraj later. But I walked out of my own kingdom. And until I accept that, I will not be able to tolerate storms. I would always try to rationalize storms, cope with storms, or, gyanialize them, but I won't be able to surrender to it and pass through it because I have to. I let myself down. I walked out of my kingdom and I have to come back and reclaim it again.
Thank you, Gopi. Wonderful. Pamela, words of wisdom from you.
I think there's a lot of skills we can learn. We need to learn to argue well, not to be afraid of our interactions that can be difficult. We need to learn how to have difficult conversations without being aggressive or blaming. And we also need to learn therapeutic ways of listening. So if someone is really having a rough day, be generous and give a bit of time and really be a good ear or a sounding board for that person, and then they'll be a sounding board for you one day. So we really, and if we escape our family of origin only to find that they're all living in the centers, and I know a lot of the people who are really may not be centerwasis. They may be living in the family where they have really difficult situations. Maybe some people in the house are drinking, maybe their children are going through really intense times. So really recognizing that the skills we learn to listen well, to really validate other people's experiences, to be able to share our own needs in relationship and say, look, I need you to listen to me today. Do you mind just not speaking and just letting me tell you what I need to say for this certain amount of time? Be brave in relationship. Ask for what you need. And if that person is worth their salt, they will give it. And you can explore and exchange in that way, because we all have to sort of find out how we live together as people. A lot of spiritual people are afraid, maybe I'll get attached. if you get attached, you'll have to deal with that, because attachment is uncomfortable. You know, in the end, it's better to have learned about love and attachment than to be numb and be lonely. So each sort of little drama has got something to offer. So I think I really needed to learn how to argue well, because I lived with, you know, an abusive dad. So a lot of my childhood was just really escaping anger. So when I found myself with quite aggressive people, I would either become more aggressive than that and scare them, or I would close off. So for me, I had to test this ground, this untested ground of saying what I needed, of saying, no, I'm not going to take that, you know, and or of exploring, why are you so angry? What's going on for you and me? What have I triggered in you? To not be afraid of those kinds of conversations, because you learn so much. And then to really, you know, we all have Baba to look at, and we know that is the resting place. That is the place where we get that resilience and that intense power and love. But when you're stuck with your logic, you know, your family of origin, or you've escaped them and you've found them at the center, you have to face it. Ultimately, you have to learn how to integrate yourself with those troubles, if you like. And then after you do that, you actually make these lifelong friends, these people who you can really, really trust. And it's magnificent. It's really worth that exploration.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pamela. Magnificent. What a great word to end with when we learn these skills. Enrique, I think the last word to you, and then we're going to close.
Well, I agree with everything. We need to learn these communication skills. Is very important for Brahmin. Sometimes it's a problem just of misunderstanding, and we need to learn some skills. But I would say, to add something more, I would say that, yes, create these spaces where you can be together, even if they are just for drinking a tea or sharing a little bit of knowledge or just talking a little bit, but creating this kind of closeness. And also for me, it's, I have the vision of freedom, I want to be free. This is one of my deep aims, So I wrote a letter to Daddy and to Sister Genti many years back. I was really suffering because of relationships. I was living in the center and there were conflict. Everything was a conflict. And 1.5 pages explaining all the details. She wrote me back just one sentence, and she said, everyone is pushing you to achieve your perfect stage. Om Shanti, enjoy. So then this still remains in my mind, and say, okay, if I want to become perfect, if I want to become free, because for me, freedom is perfection, of real freedom inside. So I need to face all these situations. So then since the beginning, I always am living with some Brahmins, I've never been alone. And many times I want to escape, many times. But I know that if I escape, I'm losing the opportunity to learn. So I created this attitude internal. I have to learn from everything, even if it's painful or if uncomfortable. But this will lead me to my freedom, my final freedom. So this helped me a lot, because still there are things with relationships. Of course there are things. But my aim is always there. I will become free if I manage with these situations. If I become free from this situation, it will come another one. But now I continue. I don't want to be stuck. So let me continue, move forward, don't stop.
So you can't be free from the situation, but you can be free from creating the energy that creates those situations, or that gets you into those situations. Thank you, Enrique.
You know, I think that on the last note, Judy, as I'm hearing Pamela and Enrique speak, what just seems to be coming back to my mind very strongly is that there's only one very simple thing that I need to do, is just increase my capacity to receive love and give love, receive love and give love. And all the different ways in which we can exercise being loving. And then, really honestly also just take a look at that relationship with Baba and to see what more do I need to do to receive the fullness of your love. Because I find that when love enters the system, circulation happens and realization happens faster without me having to labor a lot inside. And so for me, the biggest learning in this is just really stretching my capacity to be loving and to receive love.
Thank you, Gopi. I know we have to end now, and I want to thank each of the three of you so much for being present, for bringing yourself and your many, many years of experience and adventuring and exploring to the world, actually, because although we've had about 230 here, I know it will be recorded and sent to others who will benefit from this. And every one of these conversations, I mean, there's the wisdom that each of you have to share, the specific insights that will help those that are listening, I hope. But overall, the collective wisdom is just majestic. It's magnificent, to use your word, Pamela. It's really beautiful to be with you. And I've seen in the chat boxes people saying this is so helpful. It makes me so happy to be part of a family where there is this honesty and sharing. So thank you to you three for being here. Thank you to Marcelo for making it happen. Thank you to Yolanda in Mexico for keeping us technically together. And thank you to Baba for our whole wonderful guided, curated journey. And I think if we could end with a moment of, Gopi, if you turn your camera to the Tower of Peace, I think we'd all be really happy to see it. So just turn your camera there for a moment. And oh, you're not sitting there.
This is such a good place to just rest, leave everything to rest.
Okay,
So
I'll say goodbye to everyone else. Thank you all for being with us, part of this conversation. I know we'll copy all the chats and send them and maybe get them answered if there were questions not answered like we did before. But let's just end with 2-3 minutes. And then Yolanda, you can turn us off after a couple of minutes, but we'll just look at the Tower of Peace, I think.
1 second, it's coming. I just have to maneuver the table then. Okay. Right. So. Can you? No. Hang on.
Oh, it's still light.
Can you spotlight that, Judy?
I can spotlight it.
So welcome home. And
I remember who I am, letting fear and worry fall away from me. I open my eyes and see there is only love. There is only love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. When I lose my sleep, when it seems I've lost my way, when I go inside and quiet my mind, I can hear spirit gently say, there is only love. There is only love. It's a love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. sets us free. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. It's a love that heals, a love that sets me free. There is
Om Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Lots of love.